Hi everyone. Today we'll be discussing a pretty different topic. We'll be going into the importance of mining to our world's renewable energies transition. A few years ago, I knew someone in graduate school whose focus was applying machine learning algorithms to mining techniques. While the money for successful machine learning algorithms is substantial, I really didn't understand until I read this article how important improved mining techniques are going to be to that energy transition. The article we're going to be discussing is called Mining Through the Valleys of Death by Climate Tech Venture Capital. And I'll put the link to this article in the description to the episode. Mining today is less productive than it was a decade ago. Meanwhile, requirements for rare earth elements are increasing. Copper demand is expected to increase 53% by 2040, while lithium demand is expected to increase 5.9 times by 2035. According to the article, quote, electric cars are going to need about 6 times the amount of mineral inputs of conventional cars, and offshore wind plants require 13 times more mineral resources than a similarly sized gas-fired plant, unquote. This minerals transition also has a number of tie-ins to geopolitics. Over 50% of the critical materials that the U.S. uses are being imported right now. As seen with the COVID pandemic, supply chain interruptions due to other countries supplying our critical materials can be really challenging to meet consistency and sustainability in supply chains. So a focus on U.S. produced metals and full supply chains are going to be important. This is something that's brought up in the Inflation Reduction Act and addressed pretty specifically with some of the policy goals. As of this article's release, we have almost 100% dependence on China for rare earth elements in electric vehicles, weaponry, and electronics. Another thing that's mentioned in the Inflation Reduction Act is to lower, and in some cases cut out altogether, tax breaks for Russian and Chinese mining products. A few other points raised in the Inflation Reduction Act are the opening of over 300 new mines in the coming years, increasing productivity of existing mines, and leveraging new tech across a whole value chain. So that includes sections of the value chain such as prospecting and exploration of mines, developing them, the mining process itself, and finally, more efficient closure and reclamation of those mines. Another thing this article discusses, as important to consider for the metals transition, is a concept called the Valley of Death. The Valley of Death is a problem seen in a lot of startups, especially in the tech field. It can be described in the following way. The first year of a project is usually light digging and exploration of an area for mining. It can be writing proposals to blow stuff up and explore further. The first year uses technology going over the land, such as ground-penetrating radar, to see what's below the surface. A lot of this is pretty low expense and low on the number of people needed for labor. So it can be done pretty quickly and pretty inexpensively. When companies start making their first discovery, they start getting funding in later venture rounds. The potential of the project reaches a peak, and everyone is really excited for it, and everything seems to be firing on all cylinders. As the companies progress through their projects and they realize how much more work may be needed to fully extract the value from their mines, the funding and the hype around the projects tend to decrease and hit a sort of valley. This valley is a little tough to get out of. A lot of companies don't, especially tech startups, and the same thing holds true for miners. They realize that some of the valuable minerals they are expecting to take up less space in their mines than they had hoped, and they may discover some obstacles in their way of extraction, ultimately ending up less profitable than originally predicted. This is the Valley of Death, and the company is usually not turning a profit yet, so they may be out of money to reinvest and may not necessarily be able to continue. If they can make it out of this valley, the project hype will reach a new peak and everyone can start making money again. The next section of the article we're going to talk about is a few ways to get through that valley, specifically for mining. The first method to get through that valley is to make all of the mining processes more efficient and digging through the ore deposits with a little bit less waste than previously done. As I mentioned earlier, mines today are actually less productive than they were a decade ago, even with all of our new digital services and technologies on hand. Companies are less efficient because they're blowing up more space and creating a lot more waste and ultimately more emissions than if they had just applied their technology to a smaller area and focused on efficiency instead of total output. Another thing companies can do here to get through the valley of death is to focus on domestic supply chains. As I mentioned earlier, this is something that money from the Inflation Reduction Act is going to help with. The US obtaining its own supply chain verticals is going to be really important to reduce our reliance on foreign governments for some of these rare earth elements. Last thing the article mentions as important to think about is recognizing the wants and needs of the stakeholders at hand. Almost all of the copper and nickel and most of the lithium and cobalt resources in the US are located within 35 miles of Native American reservations. It's important for miners here to aim towards being sustainable, having equitable extractions, dishing out those profits in some sort of equitable way. It's tough to be perfect, but we can also take a look at the Keystone XL pipeline for seeing how poorly the equitability of these giant industrial projects can go. Thank you all for listening. I hope you learned something new and enjoy the rest of your day.